The halls of Apex Quantum Systems gleamed like glass cathedrals. Polished marble floors mirrored the footsteps of executives in tailored suits, their voices echoing with confidence and ambition. To them, the building was a temple of progress. But for one man, it was a daily reminder of everything he had lost. Michael Rowe pushed a janitor's cart down the silent corridors. The wheels squeaked faintly, a sound easily drowned out by the hum of servers and the distant chatter of engineers. He kept his eyes lowered, the brim of his cap shadowing his face. To anyone passing by, he was just another blue-collar worker in a faded uniform. Invisible, forgettable. But if you looked closer, really looked, you'd see the quiet intensity beneath the surface. His tall frame carried a natural grace that seemed oddly out of place with the mop and bucket. His hands, steady and precise, bore the faint scars of old burns and soldering accidents, marks of a man who once lived for the delicate art of building what others thought impossible. Every evening, when the hallways emptied and the executives retreated to their penthouses, Michael lingered just a little too long near the labs. His eyes would flicker toward the glowing prototypes being wheeled past him. Sometimes he paused outside glass-walled conference rooms, pretending to polish the floor, while his ears caught fragments of conversations about algorithms, coherence times, and stability protocols. Words he understood far too well. In those stolen moments, something would awaken inside him. His fingers would twitch ever so slightly, as though sketching invisible equations in the air. For a heartbeat, he was no longer a janitor's son with a mop. He was the architect he used to be. Yet, as quickly as it came, the spark would fade. He'd tuck it away, burying it under the weight of memory. At night, in his small apartment above his father's repair shop, the ghosts returned. His walls were lined with schematics, faded blueprints of designs long abandoned. On the cluttered workbench sat broken circuit boards, processors in pieces, half-finished devices. To anyone else, it looked like junk. To Michael, it was the wreckage of a dream he couldn't let go of. Sometimes, when sleep refused to come, he would reach for the photograph in his wallet. The edges were creased, the colors fading. In it, a younger Michael, 5 years younger, though it felt like a lifetime, stood with a team of researchers, a proud grin on his face, holding the prototype that had promised to change the world. Behind him, his professor smiled. At the bottom, in black ink now smudged with time, Michael Rowe, lead architect, Project Helios. He would stare at that photograph until the lines blurred, torn between two versions of himself. The brilliant prodigy who had once been called the mind of a generation, and the broken man scrubbing floors for men who stole his future. Most of the people at Apex never even noticed him. To them, he was furniture, part of the background. But sometimes, when a group of engineers whispered about a problem, he'd feel the solution rising in his throat like a tide, only to swallow it back down. His silence became both shield and prison. 5 years ago, his name carried weight in MIT's lecture halls. Now it was just another forgotten whisper in the city of Boston. But fate has a way of pulling shadows back into the light. That night, as Michael finished polishing the last corridor, his phone buzzed with an alert. A red notification pulsed on the screen. Priority maintenance request, main showcase all. Critical failure. His chest tightened. The Innovation Showcase. The grand event where Apex flaunted its newest breakthroughs to investors and the press. It was the last place he wanted to be, the last place he could afford to be recognized. For years, Michael had avoided those rooms, slipping away before the crowds arrived. He'd spent half a decade hiding from the faces that had betrayed him. But this time, he had no choice. His father's shift had been missed due to illness, and Michael had taken it to cover for him. Walking away would mean questions. Questions would mean risk. He looked down the hall toward the double doors of the showcase. Through the glass, he could see the shimmer of lights, hear the swell of voices, the applause of eager investors. And in the center of it all, the quantum processor that bore the fingerprints of his stolen work. For a moment, Michael's legs felt heavy, as though the floor itself was pulling him down. His hand trembled against the handle of his cart. Memories threatened to drown him, contracts, betrayals, his mother's voice fading in a hospital bed. But then, Something shifted inside him. A flicker of defiance. A whisper, almost too soft to catch. Not this time. He straightened his shoulders, his pulse quickening. Somewhere beyond those doors, destiny waited, whether to crush him once more or to offer him the chance he'd thought forever lost. And with that, Michael Rowe, the man the world had forgotten, pushed open the doors to the hall where everything would begin again. The doors swing open, and Michael steps into the light of the Innovation Showcase, unaware that his past and future are about to collide. Before the mop, before the faded uniform, Michael Rowe had been a name whispered in lecture halls and tech conferences across the country. At 19, he had already published a groundbreaking paper on stabilizing quantum states, something most researchers twice his age dismissed as unsolvable. Professors marveled at his clarity of thought, his way of seeing equations not as abstract symbols, but as living, breathing systems. By 21, he stood at the head of Project Helios, a research team that dared to tackle quantum coherence head-on. Their prototype was fragile, temperamental, but revolutionary. If it worked, it would drag quantum computing out of theory and into reality. And at the center of that bright, burning dream was Michael, the son of a janitor. A kid who had built his first circuit board in a basement workshop with nothing but spare parts and stubborn will. He should have been unstoppable. Enter Victoria Hale. She was everything Michael wasn't: polished, powerful, ruthless. As CEO of Helix Partners, a venture firm with more money than patience, she moved through the world like a queen who expected loyalty, simply because she demanded it. Auburn hair cut sharp, words sharper still. She knew how to charm a boardroom and crush an opponent in the same breath. Victoria had spotted Michael's work like a hawk spying prey. She appeared generous, offering Helix's private labs, funding, and a team of engineers. She called him the future of computing. She walked him into ballrooms full of investors and whispered, "These are the doors only I can open for you." For Michael, whose mother was already fighting cancer and whose father still scrubbed corporate floors, her validation felt like salvation. She promised protection. She promised legacy. She promised the world. He believed her. But dreams have a way of curdling when placed in greedy hands. Michael still remembered the night it happened, the night the betrayal crystallized into something he could never unsee. He had returned to the Helix Labs long after midnight, hoping to run diagnostics alone. Instead, he found Victoria's team downloading his designs onto servers, copying entire architectures he had spent years perfecting. He confronted her, voice trembling with both anger and disbelief. "This is my work. You don't get to take it." Victoria's smile had been calm, practiced, merciless. "You're brilliant, Michael. But brilliance without power is wasted. Did you really think the son of a janitor would be allowed to own something this valuable?" Security guards flanked him before he could reply. As they escorted him out, she leaned close, her perfume sharp in the sterile air. "Walk away, or I'll bury you." And she did. By dawn, legal contracts appeared, fine print Michael had never noticed, giving Helix control of every line of code, every circuit, every idea. When he tried to fight back, Victoria's lawyers threatened his father's job and housing. The same week, accidents destroyed his prototypes in the lab. Recommendations from professors were mysteriously retracted. His reputation eroded overnight. Then came the whispers that he was unstable, erratic, dangerous. His team, once his friends, distanced themselves. One by one, they cut ties, unwilling to risk their careers. Even Emma, his girlfriend and closest collaborator, left. Tears in her eyes, she said, "I can't throw my life away for a fight we can't win." The fight drained out of him piece by piece. But nothing shattered him like watching his mother fade. Insurance suddenly denied her experimental treatment, bills piling up, her condition worsening under the stress. On her final night, she reached for his hand, her voice a fragile whisper. "Some battles aren't worth the cost, Michael. Promise me, look after your father. Find peace." And then she was gone. Her absence hollowed him. 2 weeks later, Victoria Hale stood on a stage in a crimson dress, unveiling Apex Quantum Systems, her new empire, built on his stolen designs. Cameras flashed. Investors applauded. And Michael Rowe, once the prodigy, vanished. He burned his research notes, changed his number, moved with his grieving father to a small apartment above the repair shop. And every day, he shoved the dream deeper into the shadows, burying it under the weight of survival. 5 years passed. The boy who once lit up MIT lecture halls now pushed a cleaning cart through the very building erected on his stolen brilliance. Each night, he told himself he was invisible, that invisibility was safety, that safety was enough. But deep down, the fire still smoldered. And now here he was, standing outside the glowing doors of the Apex Innovation Showcase, a summons buzzing in his pocket. Inside, investors toasted glasses of champagne. Engineers buzzed with nervous pride. And at the center of it all, the new quantum processor, the same design Michael had once envisioned, twisted and broken under another's name, waited to be unveiled. Michael's breath caught in his chest. The very stage where his life had been stolen was about to become the stage of his return. He didn't know whether he was stepping into vindication or into another trap. But the doors were opening, and the shadows had no choice but to follow. The showcase begins. Michael steps toward the hall, where betrayal and destiny are about to collide once more. The Innovation Showcase was Apex's crown jewel. Every year, the company transformed its headquarters into a glittering arena of technology and spectacle. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like constellations. Reporters clustered with cameras, investors sipped champagne, and engineers preened beside their polished prototypes. At the center of it all, a sleek stage waited beneath an enormous holographic display, pulsing with abstract streams of quantum data. The future, they called it. And presiding over this future, Victoria Hale. She moved through the crowd like she owned not just the building, but the air itself. Dressed in crimson silk, sharp angles catching the light, she smiled with effortless charm, every glance calculated, every gesture deliberate. Around her, people leaned in, desperate to be in her orbit. Michael kept to the shadows at the room's edge, pushing his janitor's cart. His uniform made him invisible here, or so he hoped. But his eyes couldn't help but linger on the centerpiece of the showcase, the latest quantum processor, gleaming beneath a glass casing. His processor, his design. Except something about the setup looked wrong. The hum of the system was uneven. The holographic output flickered at the edges. He recognized the instability immediately, the same flaw he had warned about years ago, the one Victoria's team had dismissed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. On stage, an engineer frowned at the console, hands moving nervously across controls. The display stuttered, then collapsed into static. Gasps. Whispered confusion. Investors craned their necks. "What's happening?" someone asked. The lead engineer's voice wavered. "The coherence matrix is destabilizing. The states won't hold." Victoria's smile faltered for the briefest second before returning, sharp as glass. She strode to the stage. "Fix it." The engineer swallowed hard. "Ma'am, this could take days to diagnose." "Unacceptable." Her voice cut like a blade. "Do it now." Silence. Panic simmered. An investor cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Hale, my board was particularly interested in this processor's stability. If it cannot perform." Victoria laughed lightly, brittle beneath the surface. "Just a minor calibration issue. Nothing more." Her gaze swept the room. That's when she saw him. Michael froze. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd look past him as always. But her eyes locked onto his uniform, the mop, the cart. And something cold and malicious flickered in her expression. "You," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Janitor. Since our professionals are so preoccupied, why don't you lend us your expertise?" A ripple of laughter broke out. Phones tilted upward, recording. Reporters smirked, sensing blood. Michael's throat tightened. He lowered his gaze, shaking his head. I'm just maintenance." Victoria stepped closer, her smile razor-sharp. "Oh, don't be modest. Surely you know how to push a few buttons? Unless, of course, it's too complicated for you." The crowd chuckled. A young intern whispered loudly, Maybe he can fix it with his mop. Michael's chest burned. He tried to back away, but Victoria blocked his retreat. Her voice softened, just enough for him to hear. Still hiding, Michael? Still letting others take what was yours? The words cut through him. His name, his real name, hung in the air. Some heads turned. Whispers spread. A professor in the crowd narrowed his eyes. Rowe? Michael Rowe? The one who published the Helios paper. Victoria waved dismissively, her laughter icy. A child's concept. Nothing practical. The real work came later, from actual professionals. She gestured to Michael's uniform. The evidence speaks for itself. Murmurs rose. A few faces lit with recognition. Others with mockery. Wait, that's him. Didn't he have a breakdown? I heard he vanished. Michael's hands trembled. His breath came short, shallow. Every muscle screamed to run, to vanish into the safety of obscurity. Victoria, sensing victory, turned to the investors. Shall we let our janitor prove himself? If he can fix it, I'll write him a check for $50,000 on the spot. Her smile turned cruel. But if he fails, he'll owe Apex, personally, for the damage. The hall erupted with laughter. Reporters leaned forward, hungry. Michael's pulse thundered in his ears. His father's voice echoed faintly in his mind. Sometimes the smartest move is walking away from a rig game. He took a step back, then another. His eyes darted toward the exit. The crowd's laughter grew louder, morphing into a chorus of judgment, confirmation of everything they already believed, that he was nothing, invisible, irrelevant, a ghost. His phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket with trembling hands. A text from his father. At hospital. Don't worry. Just precautionary. Finish your shift, son. Michael's vision blurred. His father, his only anchor, was lying in a hospital bed, telling him not to worry. And here he was, cowering in front of the wolves. Shame burned through him, searing hot, threatening to collapse him entirely. His mother's voice whispered through memory. Your mind is a gift, Michael. Not using it would be the real failure. The photograph in his wallet pressed against his chest, as though reminding him of the young man he once was. The man who had dreamed without fear. Michael's breath steadied. His shoulders straightened. For the first time in years, he lifted his gaze. The crowd fell silent. Would he run? Or would he step forward and reclaim what was his? The room held its breath. Michael stands frozen at the crossroads, escape just a step away, or redemption waiting at the quantum processor. The hall was silent. Every camera lens fixed on him. Every smirk, every skeptical stare pressed down like a weight designed to crush. Michael's pulse pounded in his ears. For a moment, the urge to run almost won. But then his hand brushed against the worn photograph in his pocket. The boy he once was, the boy his mother had believed in. He exhaled slowly, and when he looked up, the panic had shifted into something else. Not confidence, but resolve. He stepped forward. The crowd parted, whispers rippling like a tide. The janitor was actually going to touch the machine? Michael removed his faded jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His forearms bore thin scars, reminders of a past spent soldering circuits and coaxing fragile prototypes to life. The chief engineer hesitated, but when Michael extended his hand, he wordlessly passed him the diagnostic tablet. Victoria smirked. Oh, this should be entertaining. Perhaps we'll use it as a training video, how not to attempt quantum engineering. Nervous laughter bubbled at the edges of the crowd. Phones tilted upward, streaming the spectacle to an audience far beyond the hall. But Michael didn't hear them anymore. The moment his fingers brushed the processor's housing, the world narrowed to the quiet hum of the machine. His movements shifted, hesitation replaced by muscle memory. His hands danced across the interface with the grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Data scrolled across the tablet. His eyes scanned quick and precise. He murmured under his breath, barely audible. The coherence failure isn't hardware. It's calibration. They inverted the mapping. The chief engineer leaned closer. That's impossible. Those subroutines are tertiary systems. They can't cause a cascade like this. Michael ignored him. His fingers flew across the screen, navigating buried pathways no one else in the room even knew existed. Only the original architect would. "The entanglement mapping is inverted," he said, voice low but steady. "You're synchronizing collapse rather than preventing it. It's elegant, but backward." Recognition dawned on the engineer's face, his skepticism slipping into awe. Around them, the room grew hushed. The mocking smiles faded as people began to sense they were witnessing something different. Something real. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, her whisper venomous. "Whatever stunt you're pulling, it won't change anything. That machine belongs to Apex. To me." Michael didn't look at her. "Your engineers built it backward. That's why it fails." For 20 long minutes, he worked in silence, adjusting algorithms, realigning protocols, coaxing the fragile quantum states back into harmony. His entire body seemed to hum with focus, as though the years of hiding had been nothing but coiled potential waiting for this moment. The crowd held its breath. Even those who didn't understand the science could feel it, that this wasn't fumbling guesswork. This was mastery. Finally, Michael made one last adjustment. He initiated the restart sequence. The processor thrummed. A low vibration filled the hall. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized. Numbers climbed. Higher. Higher still. Past the benchmarks Apex had promised. Past the limits researchers had thought impossible. Coherence times doubled. Tripled. Stabilized. The impossible had just become reality. Gasps. A murmur of disbelief. A smattering of applause. Then more. Engineers in the crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, hands trembling as they captured data streams. Reporters scrambled, calling editors, their voices urgent. The professor who had once doubted him whispered, almost reverently, "These readings, they change everything." Victoria's smile was gone, her face drained of color, her composure cracking at the edges. "A lucky guess," she hissed. "Anyone could have." Michael cut her off. His voice carried through the hall, steady and clear. "Not a guess. I designed this architecture. Project Helios. MIT. 5 years ago." He pulled the creased photograph from his wallet and placed it on the console, beside the processor. The young man in the photo smiled proudly, holding the prototype that had once promised to change the world. The room erupted, whispers turning into shouts, questions firing at once. "Is that true? He's the original architect. How did Apex?" Victoria tried to regain control. "Lies. He abandoned the work. Apex refined." Michael turned to her, his eyes cold but calm. "Some things can't be stolen without breaking them. You tried to force the design into something it was never meant to be. That's why it failed." He glanced back at the processor, still humming steadily, still defying impossibility. But it was always sound. It just needed to be understood. He stepped back, sliding the photograph back into his wallet. His voice softened, almost weary. "Your check won't be necessary, Miss Hale. Consider this my resignation from janitorial services." For a moment, silence. Then the crowd broke, half in applause, half in shock. Reporters shouted. Investors exchanged frantic looks. The world's narrative was shifting in real time. Michael turned, slipped on his jacket, and walked toward the exit. No one stopped him. No one dared. Behind him, the hall buzzed with chaos. Victoria's empire trembled. The future bent on a new axis. But Michael Rowe didn't look back. He walked out in silence. Michael leaves the hall, his name reborn in whispers and headlines, while Victoria's empire teeters on the edge of collapse. 1 year later, the glass towers of Boston gleamed the same as ever. The world hadn't stopped spinning. Taxis still honked, investors still schemed, and students still carried laptops into libraries. But for Michael Rowe, everything had changed. He stood outside a modest building in Cambridge, Massachusetts. No neon signs. No shimmering marble. Just a simple steel plaque above the door. Inside, it didn't look like a corporation. It looked alive. Young engineers clustered around whiteboards scrawled with equations. Soldering iron sparked on workbenches. Laughter echoed between labs. It was messy, brilliant, human. The kind of place Michael wished had existed when he was 21. His father walked beside him, cane tapping lightly on the floor, pride shining in his tired eyes. Retirement had finally come, not because they were defeated, but because his son had risen. He often wandered the office, shaking hands with investors, pointing proudly to the framed photos on the lobby wall. Michael at MIT, Michael holding a mop in his janitor's uniform, Michael beside the prototype that had just rewritten the future. But the photo that meant the most to Michael wasn't framed. It stayed in his wallet, the old creased picture of who he once was, carried like a promise. Row Quantum Solutions was growing. The viral video of a janitor saving a billion-dollar prototype had ignited more than headlines. It had sparked questions. Investigations into Apex. Lawsuits. Whispers in boardrooms that Victoria Hale's empire had been built on stolen foundations. Within months, her investors turned. Within a year, she was forced to step down. Michael last saw her across a courtroom, her crimson dresses replaced by muted gray suits. For the first time, she couldn't meet his eyes. He didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The truth was victory enough. He hadn't chased vengeance. He had chosen something stronger: integrity. On a quiet afternoon, Michael stepped into the lobby where a small group of high school students waited, wide-eyed. A mentorship program he'd insisted on creating, because brilliance too often hides in places the world refuses to look. One girl lingered after the tour, clutching her notebook. Dark hair pulled back, nervous hands clutching the strap of her bag. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Mr. Rowe, I read about what happened to you. How they tried to erase you from your own creation. I come from a family of janitors too. Everyone tells me people like me don't belong in science." Michael studied her, and for a moment he saw himself at that age. Hungry, afraid, uncertain if the world would ever allow him through its doors. He smiled, warm and steady. The value of your mind isn't determined by your job title or your family's. Remember that when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Her eyes brightened, but still she whispered, "But how did you keep going when everyone thought you were nothing?" Michael paused, then reached for his wallet. He pulled out the old photograph, the one creased from years of doubt and defiance. He held it out to her. "I remembered who I was when no one was watching," he said. "And I had people who never forgot, even when I almost did." The girl nodded, her shoulders straightening. She walked out with determination in her step, as if carrying a spark into the future. Michael watched her go, then turned back to the glass walls of his company. Inside, his engineers debated fiercely, their hands smudged with ink and solder, their eyes lit with passion. His father laughed with a visiting investor, cane tapping rhythmically like applause. Michael felt something he had chased for years, but never quite caught. Not triumph, not revenge, something quieter. Peace. A life finally aligned. A soul in coherence with its purpose. True dignity, he realized, was not found in defeating your enemies. It was in surviving them without becoming them. The world outside still spun, but within these walls, possibility hummed. And Michael couldn't help but wonder, how many brilliant minds still remain hidden in plain sight? And what might we achieve if we finally learn to see them? Michael finds peace, passes the torch to the next generation, and leaves the audience with a reflective question.